Thank you for the introduction. And thank you for being here today. I believe this is the last session of the day. So I really appreciate you being here to learn about what I'm going to talk about today. I'm very excited about this talk because this is the first time we publicly talk about this, and also the timing is great. I believe the theme of this conference is decision possible, and a lot of the work we have been doing is ready to enable a number of new decisions, and towards the end I will show you 4 specific use cases where a lot of what we build actually is changing the way eBay is running its business. The other reason I'm very excited is because eBay is changing, and how many of you have seen the new commercial on TV in the last 2 to 3 weeks? Okay, I guess we have a lot of customers from outside of the US. Anyway, we have a new eBay, and so if you go back to the website, it has changed a lot. And here is a screen capture of a few of the new enhancements. One of them is a feed, where you can get a lot more picture about stuff you might be interested in. The search experience is much better, much more modern in terms of how it looks, and we did a turbo checkout. So if you want to buy something on eBay, you don't have to sign in on eBay and then sign in on PayPal every time you want to do a transaction. You just do it once now, and it goes automatically the next time. Just some numbers. On a given day, there is about 350 million listings. 20% of those transactions are actually cross-border, so meaning someone is going to buy something from another country. We have 100 million downloads. So if you have not seen the eBay apps, I strongly encourage you to see the eBay apps because it's a very different user interface. It's much easier to do anything from selling to buying. In the first half of 2012, actually 1 million new users registered through the eBay apps. We have 105 million active users, including 25 million sellers. So those are pretty good statistics. We still have our unique inventory. So this is Warren Buffett, and every year as a charity event, is basically auctioning a lunch. And every year the price is getting higher and higher. From an inventory point of view, it's a very interesting thing to try to model from a SKU point of view, what would be such a SKU. And so eBay is changing, and we see 4 major trends that are driving those change. First one is mobile, so I've been talking about it, local, social, and payment. And if you think that payment is transaction, think about micropayment. Think about the number of additional transactions are going to start to emerge. And the other thing that people need to understand is the distinction between online and offline is blurring, especially through mobile. So we have something called relaser. So every time I go to a store, if there is a UPC or barcode, I'm going to scan it, and I'll check later the price, or I just keep track of it. So it's totally changed what people expect and how people are thinking about commerce. It's also redefining the space where we are competing, right? Because we are trying to remove the E from e-commerce. And the commerce space, it's a much bigger pond. It's about 10 trillion. So we are being successful in the e-commerce, but we want to be successful in all of commerce. Now let me talk about big data. A lot of you are familiar with big data, but there is a lot of different definitions. So just want to show you what big data means at eBay. So the original definition is big data, it's an order of magnitude more data. And it was true a few years ago when big data at the time means web analytics. So people were used to transactional data. They started to mine user logs, and it was so big that most of the time it didn't fit in a database. And so they had to use new tools or new ways of doing things. At eBay, we like to joke that big data is actually white cabinets, because we have enough servers in our data centers that it actually makes sense to paint the cabinet in white so we can dim the lights to save in energy. And because there is so much servers, it's actually saving energy, and you can actually see in the data center without to have too much light. I think the definition that most people seem to agree on is really the big three. So volume, variety, and velocity. Volume is you have much more data. I don't know if you saw the presentation from LinkedIn, but they have a graph where they mention the different scales. Variety means it can be very well structured data like a transaction, or it can be a text where you need to mine an email or a listing description, or it can be a user behavior, which is kind of semi-structured. And velocity is to be able to not just do stuff in a batch, not to have to wait one day to get the latest analytics, but how do you enable new applications through real-time access to those data or analytics. Just to give you a picture of our big data system at eBay in 2010, we have different systems. So in the transactional system, it was about 2.5 petabyte. It's running on Teradata. And we had a double image. And the semi-structure was our version of Singularity, which is something we built with Teradata. In just 2 years, it grew very quickly. So just the transactional data grew to 10 petabytes. So I'm just talking about the transaction going on to the site. The semi-structure grew to 42 terabytes. And then we have some other great computing, which is essentially Hadoop 24. Just in 2 years, and we have not incorporated all the social, all the local, all those fire stream of information that are emerging and that we are going to try to leverage. So big data is pretty big for us. It also means that one tool is not going to be enough. We need to have multiple tools. So those are the 3 major tools we are using. And each tool has strengths and areas of improvement. So you can see that that's kind of the way we are modeling it, where our enterprise data route is very good in terms of concurrency, in terms of I/O, flexibility, because its transactional data might not be as flexible. Hadoop is very flexible, but it's not necessarily very efficient. And so depending on what we are trying to do, we can leverage different platforms with the data. Now let me talk about the work I've been doing and leading in terms of inventory intelligence platform. And let me walk you through the different stage of analytics. And what I really like about this, it's kind of mirror my career at eBay. So I started at eBay working on the transactional data on the fraud management side to make sure we have the best experience. I came to eBay because they needed someone who understands machine learning to work with the predictive team. My first job was actually to bring the feedback transactional data into the data rows, and at the time it was 1.4 billion rows. It took us weeks just to extract the data, and it took us 10 hours just to load it into EDW Teradata. It was many years ago. But most of the companies start with transactional data. And the goal is, growing the business, understanding the business. So you want to have metrics about your business. The type of unit you are talking about are essentially users, listings, categories, site, and it's very well structured. At some point, if you were looking at the web space, a lot of companies were investing in their user experience, and eBay at the time didn't really change the user experience, and so we decided to invest in the web analytics. We used, like a lot of companies, a third-party tool, but at the time we decided we want to capture the data ourselves, and we want to mine the data ourselves. And so I started to manage a web analytics team. And this is a different type of problem you need to solve, where the data is semi-structured, so you have pieces of information structure like IP or server name or user. But then the action the user is taking on the web page is totally unstructured. It's a name-value pair. And this enables a number of things that before, with a transactional system, you cannot improve the user experience. Because you know where there is a transaction, but you don't know what led to the transaction. Versus with web analytics, you know where they come from, you know what they search for, you know what listings they looked at before to do the transaction, and so it's much more powerful. One of the things that was very successful, which now is common, used by a lot of people, but it's really A/B testing. So we built the platform from scratch, and now there is not any major release from eBay that is not going through A/B testing. And Just looking at web analytics, you can do a lot of things. You can do search optimization. But what is very powerful is to use the web analytics data and interact it with the transactional data. It's opened up a lot more things. And this is kind of what we are trying to do with inventory. So the technology, we call it ICE, Inventory Classification Engine. And what we are trying to improve is the value on selection. So everybody knows that we have value on eBay. You can find a good deal. Everybody knows that we have huge selection with 350 million listings. You can pretty much find whatever you want. But we want to go much more granular, and we really want to improve a lot of things. And so that's why what made us very successful, the fact that it was very easy to list without to structure the data, is actually hurting us in a number of areas that we want to improve because we don't have the structured data. So a big part of what we are trying to do is structuring the data. And now we are talking about SKUs. We are using machine learning and NLP. We're able to do it now because we have a lot of experience in the transactional and web analytics. If 5 years ago people would have asked me to do it, I think it would have been much more difficult. So just to level set everybody, if you are not familiar with eBay, this is one of the new search page. And here you can see this is a coffee maker. I don't know if you can read the number, but it says 7,000 listings. So if you go to a more traditional retailer, you are going to see only a few, maybe 5, 10. Here, every single seller is going to have its own listings. And so for us, it's 7,000 listings. It's not, one product, which is this coffee maker. Some of the change in terms of the work we are doing, you can see them directly on the site. And I think the best example right now is fashion. If you go to the fashion, this is exactly the same search, except that you see a lot more pieces of information to try to structure the experience. So you can see a type, silhouette of bag, which allow you to narrow down your search. And we're able to do that because we better understand the type of bags that are available on our site. At the same time, on the left-hand side, you have category-specific attributes. For example, in fashion, color is very important, so you will see it here. And then if you find something you're interested in, you are going to click on one of the pictures, and you are going to land on what we call a view item page, which is a listing description. And as you can see, there is a lot of unstructured information. So this is a title. We do have some name-value pair, which the seller can specify. So even without to say what is a product, he can still say, for example, this is a brand, and this is Tom Ford. And here we have a description. So this is a description about this particular shirt, but at the beginning he said, something that has nothing to do with the shirt. It's just something about the brand. And so essentially what we are doing with this project is we are using this information, and this information, and mining it to be able to identify the SKU, meaning what is the product behind this. And here you can see this is what we call a soft good category. So it's not a category where products are well defined with a UPC or manufacturer information. The other thing is we have 25 million of sellers. If all of those sellers were selling this shirt, we would have 25 million different descriptions of the things because they enter their own description. So it's a very challenging problem to solve. And so how are we solving this problem? The first thing we are doing is we are doing some classification. And so from the listing information, trying to figure out what is the SKU. Once we have this information, then we can start to do some traditional aggregation to try to understand demand, supply, and pricing. Once you understand demand, supply, and pricing, you can pretty much answer any question around inventory. And once we do that, then we can do what is the most interesting for me, which is what type of new analytics or what type of new algorithm can you build on top of it, and what type of insight can you get out of it. So what is a SKU? So every time you're wondering what is something, you always can go to Wikipedia. It's a great source. I'm not going to go through all the definition, but essentially a SKU is a way to identify something to keep track of your inventory. And I highlighted the part that says it's basically a data management problem. And so how do we define SKU at eBay? Because we have so many categories and we do it across so many countries. We are doing it with 3 different aspects. The first aspect is we actually hire an inventory manager, people who have been doing inventory planning in more traditional retailers. and we are working with them to try to understand what type of intelligence they need. We're able to mine the listing description. We are also able to capture the user behavior and understand what they are looking at. So just to give you a couple of examples, in the motors category, we can define a SKU as a brand and a MPN, model part number, and that's enough to uniquely identify the product. In fashion, we can define this by 4. This is just an example. It's much complicated, but just as an example, we can define it as color, brand, garment type, and size. Those are kind of the attributes that are enough for us to drive inventory. As I was saying, is we work with expert or professional in inventory, but we actually build some technology